got to get a fair deal. So, yeah, I'll do whatever I can to support them.
Those are the sounds of picketers, as well as a clip of Tonight Show host Jimmy Fallon as the Writers Guild of America went on strike. Audio courtesy the Associated Press. Welcome to another episode of Streamed and Screened, an entertainment podcast about movies and TV. I'm Terry Lipschutz, a senior producer at Lee Enterprises and the co-host of the program, along with the iconic Bruce Miller, editor of the Sioux City Journal and longtime entertainment reporter. Bruce, you are an icon, aren't you?
I have been through many writer strikes in Hollywood and seen different things that they've done over those years. I remember one time actually being in Hollywood when the writer's strike began, and there were picketers out front of our hotel because producers were in there and they wanted to let their message be known. So I've seen writer strikes like you can't believe. You know, people ask, well, now are we having no television? Is there going to be no movies? Is everything going to disappear? This is just terrible. Well, settle down. You'll be okay. This is how we got reality TV. If you may remember, in 2007, it wasn't that big of a deal. And reality TV is supposedly unscripted, even though it is largely scripted. They give them an outline, but they don't have to come up with the lines themselves. So I think what you're going to see are these things where, you know, you don't need any kind of writing done. They don't need to write the questions. It will affect things like Jeopardy because they have to write those questions. So game shows aren't necessarily immune from this. Some talk shows, like the late night shows, are scripted. They will not be around. They'll show reruns. You'll be able to see those things for a while. The stuff that you really don't care about, probably you'll see more of it. Sporting events, they'll do that. Award shows, this will be our first test. The ACM Awards, Country Music Awards that are coming up, would probably have some scripted stuff. If they haven't written it already, they're going to have to just ad-lib. And so I don't know how good Dolly Parton is at ad-libbing, but this will be a test of what it's like.
She'll be on her toes.
Yeah, she'll be good. The Tony Awards are coming up. Are they going to be able to do any kind of writing around those things? Who knows? But it will be interesting, and they're assuming that it'll go at least 100 days.
Wow.
Because within that 100 days, there are other contracts that would come due, and it gives the companies, the studios, the whatevers, an opportunity to end those contracts. And they spent a lot of big money buying talent. You know, when streaming came in, it was like, oh, we got to lock up X, Y, and Z because then they'll make product for us for the next 10 years. You saw Ryan Murphy got a big contract. Shonda Rhimes got a big contract. So all those people have these contracts that could be affected by that. And then they can just say, we no longer have that contract. Let's renegotiate. Let's see what happens. So the 100-day window is kind of a way to, now they could end it by this week and then everything, all bets are off. But likely there will be a ride out there because they want to see this kind of change. They want to see change because everybody went crazy over streaming and spent a lot of money. Now, what does this leave us, the viewer at home? Well, if you noticed, we were seeing a lot of shows from Korea. We were seeing shows from other countries. There's Swedish shows, Norwegian shows, Spanish shows, and they would subtitle them or they would dub them. That's likely that we're going to see a lot of those. And how else did we get things like Parasite was a foreign-made film that came over here, did very well. The Squid Game, there's another one that, you know, did well, and that was a foreign product. So I think you would see other shows that we didn't get a chance to see from other countries. That's where they'll look for some of the product. A long time ago, they took old scripts and just refilmed them. And that was, I think, a bust, a real bad idea, because do you want to see new people playing Mission Impossible, you know, with a script written in 1967? I don't think so. They can't make changes and they can't do things. Now, some scripts are already written and they would be able to film them, but they wouldn't be able to, like if they didn't like the way a line landed, they couldn't fix it. They'd have to just go with the line as it was.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because really we see the immediate impact with late night TV, Saturday Night Live, that kind of thing, because it's live, it's daily or weekly,
Right.
and obviously the strike has shut them down. But in reality, anything that was kind of already written and in production is probably okay, other than what you said, if there needs to be changes or rewrites. That would be the biggest problem.
Yeah, they wouldn't let them do that. Now, news shows technically are written, but they get a pass because it's the news, and so they would be able to still do those kind of scripts. Look at some of the Fox News. A lot of times it's just people sitting around talking. So they're not affected by those things.
Probably the fall season is where we might run into the biggest. If it goes, like you said, 3 months, if it goes beyond 3 months, or I would even imagine if it went a full 3 months, because it's already May right now. So, those September shows will probably go into production when? In July, August?
Well, August is usually kind of the starting date for many of them, if they're coming back. If they're a new show, they've made their first episode. They may have made a second episode, but they wouldn't go back into production until August, because they figure September would be the start date for all of that. So, and they could always delay the start of a season if they knew that they'd be done by September with the contracts and all this. They could back it up, and the fall season wouldn't start until October or November, and then fill in with other kind of special programming that they might have, or a very special episode of whatever, or binging. And I think that's what hurt all this, really, is they used to have orders for 22 episodes a year. And that kind of ensured that you were going to get a decent paycheck if you were a writer, because you would be on staff for 22 episodes. That doesn't mean you're writing all 22, but you would be under their contract, if you will, and you'd get a paycheck. Now, because there are 10-episode shows, 8-episode shows, that's a short run. And the production companies are saving money on this. And so they're not making what they thought they were, and they're having to look for another line of work. So it is, there's a reason for them to strike.
Let's go back to some audio. I've got 2 more clips. One is of Josh Gad. He's a comic and an actor. You probably know him, of course, as the voice of Olaf in Frozen. But we also have a writer named Sean Crespo, who's, I would consider, a little bit more of a rank and file writer. This is somebody that is really going to be affected by the writer's strike. So let's go and listen to them.
As sort of a hybrid here, I'll just speak on behalf of the actor side of me, is we are nothing without their words. We have nothing without them.
It's just a pile of abuses that have, you can't address them every day. They only negotiate once every few years, so these things have piled on. Like there's too much work and not enough pay. Like there's not really a path to middle class living anymore as a writer.
I have a friend who just got a job on a series and now won't be writing because they're striking. So what do? You have this job. Do you hold the time open and don't do anything? Do you go work at a grocery store? What do you do during that interim? So it is a concern, and it's a trickle down. If they're not producing shows, that means people who are in the non front of the camera jobs are also unemployed. So it trickles down. You don't have people who need to do the costumes or do the sets or whatever it might be. They're unemployed as well. So it isn't an easy thing, and it isn't big. You aren't looking at George Clooney suddenly losing a lot of money or anybody like that. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with being a little fairer about spreading the wealth around to those who are making it. And a lot of these executives will get huge bonuses, and none of it trickles down, even though maybe their network or their streaming service performed really well. This doesn't save that poor guy who is making whatever from doing another kind of job. He isn't going down to the Kroger's and saying, suddenly I'll stock shelves for you, So who knows? it happens all the time. They should be prepared before it even gets to this point.
I mean, I think the misconception too is because we heard from, of course, like Jimmy Fallon, and he, of course, wrote on Saturday Night Live. So I presume he was a striking guild member at some point, but he's obviously at a point now where he's got a big contract as a TV host, but he's a small piece of this puzzle. You're talking about a lot of gig workers, a lot of folks that, well, not even gig workers, they're contracted workers, and if the show goes off, they're not making a salary. So it's a lot of folks that are just kind of getting by, and it's you've got your light crews and your audio crews and your camera crews, and all of those folks aren't working right now, but they're sticking together. And I did see that NBC, at least for a short period of time, it sounds like they're going to pay the writers, the crew members, I think like 2 weeks from the Tonight Show, for instance. And I think Jimmy Fallon is going to pay another week out of his own pocket. So the writers and the crew members, they'll get about 3 weeks of pay, but then it's kind of, buckle up for the long haul. We're not going to keep paying you.
We won't have to worry about what we're going to watch. There will be content, and there probably is content that's in the hopper right now because they've already filmed it, and they can just start, sorting it out. It's a year from now that you'll have to wonder what are they going to do, because they aren't done with that. And technically, writers are prevented from writing while they're on strike. You say, oh, write a movie. Just write yourself another series or something, and you can write all of it. Well, they're not supposed to do that. So the idea that you would suddenly end the strike and come in with 10 episodes of a show, that's not going to happen.
Exactly. So we'll move on now from the writer's strike to what's going on in the theater. See anything good recently, Bruce?
I did see Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Not my wheelhouse, I'll just be honest. It was not a film that I was, excited about. But I do remember vaguely the controversy about Judy Blume's book, and that she was writing these very adult books for young people. And now when we hear all this, we've got to ban books because they're telling kids too much stuff. If this was something they were worried about, boy, I can give you a list of stuff we should worry about. Not that. It's very benign. If I had a kid, I think it would be even a little too juvenile for somebody who is the same age as the characters. The sixth grader, she's about 12, and, it barely talks about puberty and change of life and things like that. Barely. It's more like, how do you deal when things happen? She moves, for example, from New York City to New Jersey. And that is a big trauma for a kid. I'm going to have to go to a new school. I'm going to meet new people. Where will I fit in? But this being a thing that you would even consider banning is like beyond me. I thought it was very harmless. I thought The Wonder Years as a TV series, which covered the same era, was far more adult and far more educational, maybe in some of those areas. Like when I watched The Wonder Years, I go, oh, yes, I remember that kind of situation and they also played world affairs a little better. They talked about the Vietnam War. They talked about other things that were happening in the world while they were doing the living, if you will. With this, there really isn't that much about the world around them. Mom is living in a town where she isn't working. She's a stay-at-home mom, and that's different for her, and trying to adjust to that. But for the most part, I thought it was a pleasant little film, but hardly a controversial one.
So Rachel McAdams plays Barbara, the mother.
I think she's not given enough credit for the things she's able to do. But even with just a look, she can convey things that weren't in the script at all. And I think she's really, really talented. And I hope this doesn't mean that now she's just going to play mothers, because I think there's a lot more for her to do.
Abby Ryder Fortson played the 11-year-old Margaret in the movie. How did she perform?
Just a sweetheart. She, you feel her. A more pressing issue with this is religion. Her father is Jewish. Her mother is Christian, or they're from those families. The mom and dad really don't practice religion. And so she really doesn't kind of know where she fits in. Is she Jewish like her grandma? Is she Christian like her grandparents on the other side? Where does she fit in all of this? And she even goes to a priest at one point and goes to confession. and thinking maybe that's what she needs. But it's a more questioning film about religion and where do you fit in with that. It doesn't answer the question, but it does help you, consider that maybe that's an important question to be asking at that age.
This sounds like a movie for me, Bruce. My dad is Jewish. My dad is Jewish. My mom is Catholic. They moved me from New York City to New Jersey when I was 5, so not quite 11. Yeah, this sounds like...
God, it's me, Terry.
I think my wife is going to take my daughters to go see it, though. My girls are, they just turned 12. I have twin daughters. They're in 6th grade, so this is in their wheelhouse. An interesting thing, because it is based on the Judy Blume book, you can't find this book anywhere. So my wife has been checking out like every library in the area.
Is it banned?
No, it's not banned. You just can't get it because everybody wants it because of the movie. Yeah. So the local library, it's checked out, and there's like 12 people in front of us that want to reserve it. She was checking with another library. She checked her school library. She checked the middle school library. She teaches, so she's kind of friendly with, of course, with the librarian in the school. And the librarian says, "Give me a few minutes. I'll check it out. I'll see if I can find it." And she tracked down a copy at the high school, and they were going to pull it over so my daughters could read it.
In that case, I would buy it.
Yeah, that was going to be the next step. Like this thing called Amazon.
I've heard of it.
Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
At the top of the show, I asked you, Bruce, are you an icon? Are you an icon?
I am not an icon.
You're not?
No. I wish I were. Wouldn't that be fun?
Is there anyone here that can identify an icon?
Well, and yes, an icon is something that you can look a picture, if there's a picture of it, and you can immediately identify what it is. You can say that is a Coke bottle, for example. That would be an iconic sculpture, container, whatever you might want to call that. But you would look and, it has that kind of green glass. It has that kind of ribbed look, and it has the Coca-Cola script on it. So that's iconic. Mount Rushmore is iconic because you look at it, you immediately identify it. The Statue of Liberty, iconic. Those are things that stand the test of time, but then there are things that disappear. I talked to David Rubenstein, who's doing a PBS series on icons, and he wanted to look into this and see what really fit that definition. And he said, sometimes things are like the Ambassador Hotel. The Ambassador Hotel was where Bobby Kennedy was shot. And they closed the hotel, and then it just sat there for a long time, and now they've torn it down. But, at one point they used it for filming TV shows. I went there and saw a filming of Love Boat, and they were filming inside the hotel like it was a cruise ship. And so it was still used, but it wasn't used as a hotel because it had perhaps a negative connotation, and people didn't want that to be kind of the overriding attention it got. But that would be considered the Oscar. The Oscar is an icon. You could easily look at that. And there are so many stories about that. Where did it get its name? Even the people who are doing research on it don't agree. They don't, it's maybe this person, it's maybe that person, it could even be Betty Davis. And they've all been kind of debunked in terms of who actually gave it the name and why it happened. But icons are things that are around us that we can immediately identify. And why are they iconic? And that series is kind of fun to lean into. I had a chance to talk with David, and he explained some of the things. He's a huge collector. Of course, he's also a billionaire. So I guess if I were a billionaire, I could be an iconic whatever. But he collects a lot of things, and what he loves to collect are documents. What would you think immediately you'd have to have a copy of?
I don't know, the Declaration of Independence?
And he does have a copy of the Declaration of Independence. And, and I thought, well, why do you want this? And he says it's to be able to give it so that others can see it. He loans these things out, these documents out to libraries, museums, whatever, so that then we all can have a shot at looking at it. We all can't go to the Smithsonian. We all can't go to the White House. We can't go to those places. But if they tour and travel, you would get an opportunity to look at those things. So icons, he talks about what makes an icon.
Interesting. So let's go ahead and listen to that interview with David Rubenstein. We'll be right back.
Can I ask what really makes an icon? What is an icon?
An icon is something that people know it. They think they know a lot about it. They may not know as much as they think. But for example, if I showed you a picture of an icon, you would say, well, I know what that is. So I showed you a picture of the White House, you would know what that is. If I showed you a picture of the Washington Monument, you know what that is. Those are iconic because they are so well known that everybody kind of has a sense of what they mean. And for the purpose of this series, we took iconic symbols that mean some things to people about our history. So Statue of Liberty means something to people, or the Golden Gate Bridge, or the Hollywood sign, things like that.
You look at things like that Andy Warhol did. He painted a lot of things, and I think he even had a series called Icons.
He did. He did, and yes, what he did is when he did the Campbell Soup thing, he basically was taking something everybody recognized, and he made it a work of art. And yes, you're right.
So could those things, though, fall out of favor? We look at now when statues are taken down, and I'm sure for many people in that area, a statue would be considered an icon for them.
Yeah. Yes. Well, nothing is forever, so there may be some iconic buildings that are torn down. Let's say in Hollywood or L.A., there was an iconic hotel. Was it the Ambassador? The one that Robert Kennedy...
Ambassador, yeah.
Right. I think wasn't that torn down or something?
Yes, it was.
Right. So there is an iconic building. It's gone. So sometimes iconic buildings, they don't stay forever. Iconic things don't. The things that we did in the series are probably likely to be around for a while.
When you were making your list then of the ones that you wanted to include, how long was the list, and then how did you winnow it?
Well, we kind of went through maybe 25, 30 that we thought were appropriate, and then you want to have a balance. We wanted something from the South, something from the West, something from the Midwest, so we wanted that. Secondly, we wanted things that we thought would have an interesting story. So, for example, take the Statue of Liberty. Everybody thinks they know what it means. It has nothing to do with immigration when it was put together. It was really for Franco-American friendship and thanking us for getting rid of slavery. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's, so we're trying to do is have iconic symbols that people think they recognize it, but they don't really know the history of it. So, for example, take the American bald eagle. Many people think that's our national bird. We don't have a national bird. We never had one. There's an old story that Benjamin Franklin wanted to be the turkey over the bald eagle, but that really isn't true either. But bald eagle, why did it become such an iconic symbol of our country, even if it's not officially a national bird? And what's so unique about the bald eagle? And it's only in North America that there are these American bald eagles. So we wanted to educate people about it. Take the American cowboy. American cowboy is an iconic thing. The Marlboro ad is the most famous ad. But turns out that cowboys are not what you probably saw on TV when you were growing up. Turns out that cowboys were not fighting Indians. They were really herding cattle to take them to slaughter, really. That's what their real mission was. And they weren't all white. They were indigenous, they were Latinos, they were African Americans, and they weren't even carrying guns. They basically were just dealing with the cattle. And it's a tough job they have, but it was something people think they know something about, but they don't really know as much as they think they do, and that's why we try to educate people about it.
Well, one I would think that you would automatically have would be Mount Rushmore, but is that too easy? Is that one that people would say, oh, come on, now everybody knows what that is, and it isn't too...
Mount Rushmore, if we did another 8, probably that'd be a good one to do. Mount Rushmore was one we thought about. It's a good symbol. The controversy was very controversial to pick who the presidents were, giving the person the permission to do it. He had some really controversial things in his background. And interestingly, though, the man that carved that,
Hudson Borgle,
he actually carved was responsible for the initial effort to carve the Confederate symbols in Stone Mountain. And he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan at one point.
So some of these stories go much deeper than we would even expect.
Yeah, when you dig, I think I know a reasonable amount about American history for a non-professional, but I was astounded to learn some of the things I learned about some of these symbols.
When we look today, though, at things that are happening in politics, people try to co-opt symbols as somehow they have a greater hold on it than anything else. And the flag is a real example.
Perfect example. Richard Nixon started wearing a little flag here. Well, does that mean he's more patriotic than I am if I'm not wearing it? And I think the Republican Party has done a pretty good job for a while before the Democrats caught on of having flags at the backdrop. When Reagan would make speeches, they put flags behind them, right? So Democrats finally figured out that's a good thing. but it wasn't. For a while, Richard Nixon kind of co-opted the idea that the American flag was something that was Republican, and he was more American than the Democrats.
Yeah, it's just insane. You want to scream at times when you think, wait a minute now, you don't have the right to this just yourself. But I guess it's first come, first gets. And
well, somebody cleverly thought up some of these things. But think about, people today, they wear symbols on their lapels, Ukrainian Americans or whatever. And they're trying to co-opt the iconic symbol and make people think that they kind of own it, or they're more pro-Ukrainian than I am because I'm not wearing a lapel pin.
Ribbons. When ribbons started coming out, and then it became, well, what does this color mean and what is this for? And it just keeps going.
Well, why do people want to co-opt an iconic symbol? Because they want people to think about them a certain thing, and a symbol can do it quicker than words. In other words, Richard Nixon doesn't have to come out and say, I really am more American than George McGovern. Just wears a little lapel here, the flag, and the symbol does it. Like, a picture's worth 1,000 words, they say. So
you're a collector.
Right.
How do you choose what you collect?
I collect different types of things, but in the historic documents area, there are a lot of very famous historic documents, and so I want to get the ones that are available. But the most, I'd say the most famous one I own is the Magna Carta. But in this country, people know the Declaration of Independence better. So I own probably more copies of the Declaration than anybody, but I put them all on display so people can see them. My whole effort is to educate Americans about our history, on the theory that if you have a more educated population, we'd have a more informed democracy. When that country was set up, the theory was that white Christian men who owned property would be the guy people voted, but we wanted them to be educated. And to the extent we can educate now all voters, you're better off. People don't know what they're voting about. That's not good. And we don't teach history or civics as much as we did 40, 50 years ago.
Does it lose value then because we don't?
Sure. So, for example, if you don't know, 2/3 of Americans, when asked in a survey, what are the 3 branches of the federal government, cannot answer the question. So is that a good thing? It's probably not a good thing. It's better to have people know a little bit more about the history of your country. Also know the bad things. The theory about studying history is that you want to learn the bad of the past so you don't repeat it. That's the main point of learning history. And you can learn about the good and hopefully get it better, but you want to learn like, for example, when you went to grade school, was it beat in over your head that Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were slave owners? Probably not. I didn't have that I'm obviously older than you, but when I went to school, George Washington was a great man, never told a lie, chopped down a cherry tree, told his father, all that stuff, which wasn't true. And he didn't emphasize he was a slave owner. Thomas Jefferson said all men are created equal, and he did that when he had slaves with him, and he had 600 slaves in his lifetime. So I think we should educate people about the good and bad, and then just make sure people can make informed decisions about the future.
You put your collection on display at all times?
Well, it's in various places. So I have collections on display in lots of places around the country. But for example, a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln signed the original, which is in the archives. He signed 47 souvenir copies, of which 20 are left. I own 2 of them. I put one in the African American History and Culture Museum, and one tours around the country. Or the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery. I own some rare copies of that. And I put them on display at various museums or exhibitions that people ask me to.
Are there holy grails that you're still looking for that you're trying to get?
Gettysburg Address, there are only 5 copies of that. Lincoln actually wrote out 5 copies. They're hard to get those. One is owned by Cornell, one in the Lincoln Museum, one in the White House, and 2 in the Library of Congress. I probably weren't going to be able to buy them. The problem with being a collector is, what do you do with the collection? And you can only do 3 things with them in the end. You give it to a museum, you sell it and take the profits, either use it for yourself, or you make a charitable contribution with it, or you give them to your children. I have 3 children. They're all well-educated. They all went to great schools, Harvard, Stanford, and so forth. They have no interest in any of my collections.
Okay.
So they don't want it. They just said, we don't care about it. So I could go to museums and give them my collections, and maybe I'll do that. I'm the chair of the Library of Congress board, so obviously I'm like them, and I was the chair of the Smithsonian, And so I was thinking the Smithsonian's great, but I haven't decided yet. It's in my will. If I die tomorrow, there's a way to handle it, but I'm always changing my mind, so I can only,
Who's nice to me today is the person who gets it, right?
Right.
With the Hollywood sign, that is such a kind of an interesting choice to be in this bunch.
Well, we wanted to do things on all parts of the country, and this was for Southern California. It's an iconic symbol. You could find others. But it's interesting. Most people think it's designed to promote Hollywood. As you may know, it was to promote a land development company, Hollywood Land. And then over the years, it's almost been taken down. It's been fixed. It's been restored. And it's become a symbol of Hollywood. Now, Hollywood, as you know, doesn't really exist in a meaningful way. All the Hollywood studios are not in Hollywood. But it's kind of a symbol. So if you go to somebody in Iowa and say, let's go to Hollywood, we'll see some movie stars, they might think that there's actually some movie stars walking around Hollywood, but there's nobody there.
The idea, though, that they would do a second one on the other side of the mountain, I think is a really stupid idea. Maybe that's just my...
Oh, that's the other side?
Yeah, another take where you could actually have your picture taken in front of the Hollywood sign,
really?
And it would be easier to get your picture than it would be to, where do you hike to get the best picture of you and whatnot. And I find, should there be more than one of some of these things? I don't know.
Well, obviously it devalues the currency if you're more of them, but what I really want to do is people talk about history and learn more and appreciate more about American history with a theory that it'll make us a better country.
All right, thank you, Bruce, for that interview with David Rubenstein. I actually met his ex-wife. Did you know that?
What?
Yes. Not
you know
in any, nothing went. I wasn't the cause of their divorce or anything like that.
No money was crossed?
No. Alice Rogoff, his ex-wife, and actually, I believe the mother of his children, is a media publisher. She used to own the Alaska Dispatch. She purchased the Anchorage Daily News in, I think it was like 2014 or so, and merged them to the Alaska Dispatch News. So she was the publisher of that newspaper, and as publisher, took a few editorial staff members to the Poynter Institute, which is it's an organization that helps journalists like you, like myself. It's training and things like that. And we were in a group together. And at the time, I was the digital director at the Louisville Courier-Journal in Kentucky. She was the publisher of the Alaska Dispatch News. Her paper, my paper, along with the Denver Post and the Virginian Pilot, we were in a group together. So I met her. We talked a bit. We were collaborating.
Did she say, you want to look at the Magna Carta? I've got one in my bag.
She didn't. No, she did not bring up the Magna Carta at all. But what was funny is this was in 2017, and it was part of a year-long program. So we went to Florida. We all met. We all hung out together for a little bit. And then shortly after we met, the paper went into bankruptcy.
Oh, no.
And then she was forced to sell. So then when we got back in 2018, she wasn't there. The newsroom was kind of reorganizing, and that was kind of that. But yeah, that our 6 degrees of separation between you, me, David Rubenstein, very small. We didn't even have to get to Kevin Bacon.
He said his kids don't want these things. So do you think we could be in the will?
Maybe. We have a personal connection to the family.
He's there right with us, right? I'll take one of those old documents. I can frame them, right? We'll take it to Michael's. I'll go to Michael's with my my Declaration of Independence, and I'll say, yeah, could you frame it so it looks nice? It's a gift from a friend.
You got to wait, though, with Michael's until they've got that, like, buy one...
Yeah,
I got 50% off the coupon.
Yeah, I can't do it unless I can save some money. No.
We're gonna do it right, but on a budget to do the declaration.
We want it to look nice, so it hangs in our office, and we could point to it and say, "There's my Declaration of Independence."
There it is.
The Magna Carta, though, so just know.
So I will take the Magna Carta. You're gonna take the Declaration.
Yeah, I get the Declaration because I write big. And I'm sure we could add our names on the bottom if you wanted to.
We'll just add our John Hancock to the bottom.
we can put some tape, some electrician's tape or something, and then we'll write our own names on the bottom. So if we needed to keep it right, we'd be okay. Hey, you know what's coming up this next week?
What's that?
We're getting into the big summer movie season, and yeah, it's not affected at all by the writer's strike. It is not going to be stopped. Barbie is coming this summer. Barbie,
thank goodness,
will be with us, so we don't have to worry about suddenly she's holding out and saying, no, I'm not going to do a movie. It's done. So next week, let's look at those new kind of summer movies that should be it's always considered blockbuster season in the summer. And this week we started with the first one, really, that'll be a big moneymaker, and that's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the last one of the films. So we'll watch that. We'll talk about that one, and then we'll preview the ones that are coming up next week.
That sounds good. So before I let you go, though, why do all the blockbusters come out during the summer? Is it just because everyone's off from school and they're on vacation? I always wondered that. Like, why is it like basically Memorial Day through almost like July 4th is kind of the big drop too? Why is that?
There was a little film back in 1975 that changed the course of history. That little film said that people would flock to the theaters if they weren't in school, if they were vacationing and they wanted to have something fun to see, and it made a huge amount of money. That movie was Jaws. Jaws is considered the first blockbuster, and it did so well that they realized they should program for that, and they looked for those kind of high-concept films that would be good to release at those times. There are seasons that are big for this. Memorial Day weekend is always big. 4th of July is always big. Labor Day is big. Christmas and the fall are considered far more, I don't want to say intelligent pictures, but certainly ones that take a little, they're the Oscar bait. They're going to be the films that are going to win awards. But summer ones are usually ones that are fun, exciting, have a lot of action in them, and will get you to eat and drink a lot. And you're more willing to do that when you feel like you're on vacation than any other time. So you can blame Jaws for setting off the concept of blockbusters. It is readily recognized as the first big blockbuster.
Wow, I did not know that. So little history, some iconic history.
A little history there. Yeah, and Steven Spielberg has to be the king of blockbusters because he had a lot of them. And guess what? His company is behind a big one this summer.
That's right. We'll talk more about that next week. Until then, thank you for listening to Streamed and Screened.
We're not going on strike.